In this video, we're going to focus on graphing trig functions, specifically cosine and sine. There is a part 1 to this video, but here we're just going to get straight into the graphing. I do want to say right now that we will be graphing only one period. That means just one cycle of the graph before it starts to repeat itself. So let's begin. The first thing again that we want to do is we want to find the amplitude and the period. So the amplitude is going to be, again, absolute value of a, which in this case is 2, and the period will be 2 pi divided by 1. In front of sine and x, or sorry, in between sine and x is just 1. So that's why we're going to do 2 pi divided by 1, which just ends up being 2 pi. Now, you want to then begin by just sort of marking where your amplitude is going to be. So mine's going to be right here and down here at 2 and -2. And then I'm going to start by writing my period all the way to the far right. So over here we have 2 pi, okay? Now we want to cut pi in half. So between 0 and 2 pi, we're right here. And that's just going to be 2 pi divided by 2. So that's just pi, right? Now we want to go ahead and find the distance between here and here, which ends up just being this distance. Again, if you look up definition of a midpoint's always going to be a plus b divided by 2, and that's what this point is. But if you always have your one point be 0, right, like this, and then the other point be an actual value like pi, you just divide by 2. So this point here is pi divided by 2, okay? Now you can use that as your step, and what I mean by that is every step you're going to take is going to be pi divided by 2. Why? Because your one step here, this distance here is just pi over 2. So pi over 2, 2 pi over 2, 3 pi over 2, 4 pi over 2. So the missing link here is just 3 pi divided by 2. And you always want to check to make sure nothing's reducible. In this case, it's not, right? We've kind of been lucky with that. And at this point, the last thing you want to do is remember what your graph looks like. And in this case, we're talking about sine, right? And this works when there is no phase shift, right? There is no vertical shift. If there were those things, we would have to take those into account accordingly. So, but in this case, it's just a regular sine graph. So we start where sine typically starts at, and that's at 0 here, right? And then it's going to go up to the amplitude, down to the midsection again, down to the bottom amplitude, and then back up, right? So you kind of see that you're doing one step up, one step down, then one step to the bottom, then one step up, one step to the top, etc., etc. And then this again is just one period. So then we're going to go ahead and just line this up, right? And this is one period, right? This is an interval before the graph starts to repeat itself. If you notice, if we were to break 2 pi again, we just be repeating a next cycle, and that would be 2 periods. So for most classes, you kind of, not for us right now at the moment, we are eventually going to go to the left, right? And this is kind of how it's going to end up being. So just a rough sketch, but it'll be something like that, right? And that'd be another period. But for now, we're just sticking with one period. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing, but with cosine. So please pause the video at any point and go back and try this out for yourself. Amplitude is it's absolute value of a. In this case, it's just 1. One's right here. One's right here. Okay. And then period is 2 pi divided by, for those of you who forgot, it's b. But in our case, 2 pi divided by b. B is, well, again, whatever's in between your trig function and x. And in this case is 4 pi. So we're going to go ahead and wrap it up with 4 pi. And again, for those of you who have forgotten, pi is just another number. So if we focus in, this can really just cancel out, right? It's nothing crazy. It's just a number treated as such. And then its outcome is just 2 divided by 4, which simplifies to 1 divided by 2, right? So now that's your period. Now your period is missing the pi part, but remember the pi component is just another number. So go ahead and graph the 1/2 like we did. I've already marked my amplitude, right? And then we're going to go ahead and start. So that is going to be 1/2 here. And then again, from, I won't keep repeating myself, but from this distance to this distance, the midpoint says you add those two values and then divide by 2. So 1/2 divided by 2 is literally 1/4. Now, if you got to practice the the fraction part, please pause the video and do that. It is going to be 1/4. Then from the origin again to now 1/4, the half point of that is going to be 1/8, right? So this trick really helps, especially if you are good at fractions, right? If you are not, practice a little bit. This will make much more sense. And then again, one step here is 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4 divided by 8, right? So the missing link is 3/8, and I just double check to make sure it is not going to be simplified. And that's it. We are essentially done with that part. So we're going to go ahead and quickly graph it. Okay, now in this case, we are starting with cosine. Cosine does start at the top, especially because there's no negative in the front, right? So we are going to go ahead and mark our value here. Come on, go back. There you go. And then we go down 1, and then we go down another, and then we go up, and then up another 2. Whoa, let me backtrack because our amplitude was 1 and I went 1 down, 1 too far. Okay, so then I go back up to 1. So with our amplitude being 1, that's what we should have. Then we go ahead and trace it. Boom, boom, boom. And voila, right? The amplitude looks a little weird because obviously the scale was every 2, right? But our amplitude being ended up 1, which is why it looks a little squishy. Cool. I'm gonna go ahead and just do one more. So let me do negative cosine pi over 2. So this one I'm gonna speed up all the way to the graphing portion. So I'm gonna go ahead and just do that. Go ahead and pause the video and try to on your own if you want. But our amplitude is still 1, period. Right? If you do it right, your period should be 4. I'm gonna go ahead and select my markers here. So with that being said, divide by 2. 2, 3, 1. And voila. Now this is the part where I'm just trying to go ahead and sort of help you out here, right? So what I would do is don't worry about the negative just yet. Worry about the cosine part, okay? So what this is going to do, why don't we just go ahead and graph cosine as though it was positive, but we're going to do that dashed, all right? So that's very purposeful. We're going to dash it. So we're going to mark it as we normally do, okay? But this time it's going to be dashed, right? Because again, this is kind of like a reference graph for me. I want to get the fact that this is going to be reflected over the x-axis, right? I'm going to get that right. So again, now we're going to go back and look at the negative part of that, and we're basically going to reflect it, right? So now I'm going to hit my markers. By the way, you don't have to do this. This is just if you want to go ahead and make sure that you are as accurate as can be, right? Kind of like training wheels. You can go ahead and drop it as you see fit. So this is kind of a rough, not a rough, but it is a nice little sketch to get done in the beginning. Meanwhile, you're sort of getting that reflected part done correctly. And it gives you something to look back on if you need to check your work.